Hello, everybody. What's up? Another episode of the Fantasy Cast. What is this, episode 6 now? I can't even keep track.
It's episode 6. We're here.
We've made too many of these things now, man.
Yeah, not enough.
Episode number 6. Coming at you here. As always, joined alongside Ty White. I'm Lachlan McTagg. What a week it was.
It was an incredible week. It was a great week for so many reasons. There were some phenomenal games on this past week. I mean, London, there was a game in London, Loch, and we talked about that last week with the Wings and stuff. I personally didn't go to B-dubs and heat them up the next morning, but that was exciting because it was, I believe, for red zone football, it was the longest day of football in like 50 years or something like that, or maybe in history of actual continuous football on NFL red zone. So that was pretty cool. And yeah, Chargers won. We're going to be talking about, oh, you bet your sweet bottom. We're going to be talking about that. Falcons won too, Lachlan. So, I mean, some good stuff this past week in football.
Yeah. Before we get into football, I mean, how's life on your end, man? Another week, another day in paradise.
Another day in paradise, indeed. I'm not in my usual setup. I'm home this week for reading week. I'm off from university, and that's how she goes. How about yourself, Loch, in Massachusetts?
Yeah. So had a couple games this weekend. We went 1-1. We won in overtime on Saturday. Which was so exciting. We got the dog pile at the end. It was a good feeling. I won't lie. And then Sunday, unfortunately, lost. But one of our friends came down. His mom was running the marathon. So he came down, had a visit with us, stayed over a couple nights at the Billet House, came to one of our games. It was really good to see him again. And then Monday, we went into Boston and went to the marathon.
Oh, wow. How was that?
And for anyone who hasn't been to a marathon, it is crazy, especially the Boston Marathon. I believe it was the 120th or 125th. It might have been the 125th Boston Marathon this year.
It's a milestone.
The scene in Boston was crazy, though. Trying to get parking was a nightmare. We lucked out with that, but we were at the finish line, and the amount of positive energy that's just radiating around Boston is just incredible. Like you could feel it. There was U.S. military personnel that were running as well, so they got a massive applause. And yeah, everyone that come through, like there'd be some people that be waving their arms, hyping the crowd up, getting into it. One guy had a beer.
That's awesome.
Guys got tossed a beer as he was going across the finish line, so he was an absolute nail gun. But yeah, other than that, I mean, just preparing for 2 more games this weekend.
Well, best of luck to you, Loch. But speaking of games, we have an upcoming week of fantasy football, and we're going to be talking about the past week. So this episode, we're going to be going over how we did and our predictions for our starts and sits. We're going to be looking at top performers as usual. We're going to be going through some waiver wires, pickups, some more starts and sits for the upcoming week, and as always, the fantasy player of the week with the fantasy question of the week. So, Lachlan, we're going to start off today by taking a look back. Last week, we introduced our starts and sits for the first time on our podcast, and we were right about quite a few things. And I'm very pleased that we were right about quite a few things. So let's go through some of those things. So first, we have the starts. I said start Matt Ryan, and he put up 21 points against a crappy Jets defense. There you go.
Matty Ice,
easy peasy. It was a good win too. We said start, and all the other ones that I'm going to mention for start are all Bills players. So Bills players that you should start. You should have started Emmanuel Sanders. You should have started Dawson Knox, Josh Allen. That's a given. And Zach Moss. Zach Moss at the lowest, about 12, but it's still decent production from an RB2, maybe even a flex.
Funny story here. I go through weird kind of superstitions a little bit in fantasy football sometimes. So I actually didn't. I actually went against the Fantasy Cast's advice, which I know better of, considering I am a co-host. I did not start Emmanuel Sanders last week, and I paid for it. I suffered my first loss of the season, only because Kenny Golladay left the game and then led me to getting a goose egg.
Fair enough.
Which was nice. Thank you, Kenny. But yeah, I'll know better to not go against our advice ever again.
But sometimes you have to listen to your own superstitions. I mean, I have many of my own when I actually watch football games, not necessarily for fantasy football, but I mean, that's a mental thing. So, but Emmanuel Sanders did put up 20. Dawson Knox, 20.7. Another big game for Dawson Knox. He's so good. He's getting so much better. Josh Allen, 36. So those are some good things that we predicted, Loch. But we also predicted some good sits. What did I tell y'all? I told y'all to sit Trey Lance because he only put up 14 points against Arizona. And I was right about that. He didn't look bad necessarily in the game, but I mean, he's a rookie quarterback with actually Kyle Shanahan's play calling. I didn't really agree with I watched a lot of that game. And Arizona just was able to shut them down. We told you to sit. This is we're partially wrong here, but partially right. When I told you to sit some players on the Browns offense versus the Chargers, one of them I meant was OBJ, and he only put up 4 points against the Chargers. OBJ, it's too bad to see his production is declining. There's less and less targets every week. Told you to sit Miles Sanders. He got about 10 points, which isn't great. So hopefully if you did sit him and start someone else, they got you more points. Noah Fant, this is what I'm really proud about. I told you to sit Noah Fant down. You're starting tight end. He only got 5 points against Pittsburgh, so that made me feel pretty good. Joe Mixon told you to sit. He had 10.5 points against Green Bay. But Lachlan, we're humble. We're humble people. We have to respect our decision making and be able to recognize when it was wrong. So I was wrong about some parts of the Browns offense, which was an absolute shootout versus the Chargers. First of all, as a fan, that was amazing. Amazing. Game. I know, man. God. It was just nuts. I seriously couldn't believe what I was witnessing. It was like a college football shootout. And thankfully the Chargers came through. We're 4-1 now. Oh God, I'm loving that. But we did tell you to sit some of the Browns offense. Baker Mayfield had about 20 points. Both running backs, Chubb and Kareem Hunt, had over 20 points.
Yeah, they got utilized really, really nicely against that Chargers defense.
Yeah,
which I mean, going forward could be a bit of a sign. Yeah. And I mean, the next guy's probably David Njoku too.
No, David Njoku is going to be the next name I mentioned, but I mean, no one was expecting him to do anything in that game. So
no, he's been a backup to Austin Hooper, and Austin Hooper hasn't really done much this season. So why would Njoku do anything? Yes. And then all of a sudden he's just the league tight end for no reason.
Yeah. I mean, that was crazy. So that I also told you to start Corey Davis versus Atlanta. He only had about 8 points, I think. So that wasn't, it didn't work out for him. And Darnold versus Philadelphia, which actually we're going to go back to Darnold a bit later in the episode. But he only had about 13 versus Philadelphia, which again, it was an upset, but still it's too bad. Hate to see it, Lachlan. Hate to see it, but it's okay.
Hate to see it.
Now let's move on, as always, to some top performers from this past week, and we're going to start off with quarterbacks. And I know we were talking a bit before the episode about this guy, Loch. You mentioned he had a fantastic week, and he did. It's Tom Brady had 37 points. Josh Allen, 36. I mentioned before. Jameis Winston, 26. These next two, though, oh my gosh, just incredible. Lamar Jackson had 41 on Monday Night Football against the Colts.
He threw the football. He threw the football.
Oh my gosh, he's putting those running back memes to rest.
The football. Oh my God.
It's nuts.
Instagram didn't know what to do with themselves.
No, they stopped. No. The running back memes they had to take down and make memes.
They're just deleting them.
I know. So, I mean, that was nuts, especially because they only had like 9 points coming into the fourth quarter. So for them to come back and get all the 2-point conversions, I mean, that was amazing. But Justin Herbert, the leading player in fantasy football this past week out of any position, he had 42.82 points. He was just an absolute beast against that Browns team. And not to mention the number one defense in the NFL up until that point. And we almost 50-pieced them. And oh my God, that just brought it. That was Thanksgiving too. I was with the family. I was watching that, and that just brought a tear to my eye. It was something special to watch. Moving on to some wide receivers, Loch, Devontae Adams. Oh my God, he shows up every week. That guy. He put up 37.
Another week in the office for the Packers offense, man.
Yeah, sure. Ever since after that week 1 game, I mean, oh my God, they've completely transformed, and they're looking much more like last year. Except the kicking. Oh my God, that was That was a horrendous game. If you were a fantasy manager who was starting Mason Crosby, or like I think the other guy's name is McPherson.
Forget the fantasy managers. I don't even want to know what people did to their TVs watching that game. If you're a fan of either of those teams, like, actually, if you're a Bengals fan and you didn't get slaughtered, you're probably already winning.
Yeah.
Theoretically.
Yeah.
But if you're a Packers fan, like you are literally pulling teeth.
Yeah, you're pulling out eyebrows, you're throwing crap at your television. I mean, it was bad. Shout out to Robbie McEachern, who's in our league. Tough loss for the Bengals. However, the Bengals do look a lot better this year. So that's always an upside. Loch, once again, Mike friggin' Williams of the Chargers. He had 165 yards, 2 touchdowns for 36 fantasy points. He's amazing. I think he's 4th in the league in receiving yards right now. Marquise Brown, 33 points.
Hollywood, baby.
Hollywood. He treated us to I'd say somewhat uncharacteristic week. You don't usually see him dropping 30 plus points. So good enough on you. Antonio Brown, who actually I did tell people to start. I had a question, who should I start, Antonio Brown, or I think it was one of the Philly receivers, and I said start Antonio Brown. Absolutely. I think he's going to shred. I mean, the Bucs play, it's not weird to say they play amazing in good weather, and while they're at home, they lit up the fins, squish the fish, baby. That's all I like to see that, because I mean, go Bills, you know what I'm saying? So Antonio Brown, 31 points, and oh my God, Lachlan, I never thought I would say this name again on this podcast. Kadarius Toney.
Oh, geez.
29 points. Are you kidding me? Without a touchdown, too. He had 10 receptions for 189 yards. So that's something that's just mind-boggling.
This is a prime example of fantasy foot. Like, this is just a certified fantasy football moment. Yeah. Someone who's not even remotely close to being on anyone's radar. And then just all of a sudden is going to be a hot commodity on the waiver wire. Like,
yes, absolutely. He's going to be a hot commodity. And I mean, he did slap that guy in the helmet or punch him and get suspended, I think, for a game. So, I mean, but after that, hopefully, Daniel Jones is not playing bad right now. The offense is not playing too bad for the Giants. And but we will talk about Saquon Barkley in a little bit, which is too bad for Saquon. But moving on to some RBs. Oh my gosh, Lachlan, am I mentioning another Charger on this list? Because it's Austin Eckler at 32 points, 3 total touchdowns. And one of them, he was carried into the end zone because the Browns wanted him to score.
Yeah. I saw a pretty funny meme. It was like when the defense has Austin Eckler in fantasy, and they just kind of like, I was like, oh man.
Carried his ass in the end zone.
I'd get manhandled by any one of those guys, so it's not really my place to go and make fun of them that much. But when I saw that, I chuckled a little bit.
It was funny because Eckler's a fairly small guy, and to just see him cascaded into the end zone by like 8 other Browns defenders, I mean, that was kind of funny. But hey, it was fantasy managers love that, because the Chargers were just gonna like try to drop the ball and maybe score a bit later. Jonathan Taylor, wow, he's playing a lot better. He had 31 points.
Did we not say don't worry about Jonathan Taylor? Like a couple
we're right again. Oh my gosh, you're correct. We did say that.
Another running back, Ezekiel Elliott too, who I also said, if you have him, keep him, but not try and trade for him. So if you traded for him and you bought low, your return on investment is looking really nice.
Yeah, good on you for sure. That's very smart. And actually, we did say both of those things. So that's something else. I mean, we're kind of proud of here at the Fantasy Cast, powered by Shocker Sports, as usual. Myles Gaskin had 31 points, 2 touchdowns. So that's actually a bit of a surprise in fantasy managers.
The fish got squished, but Myles Gaskin had himself a day. So
yeah, he did. And the thing was, a lot of fantasy managers actually probably benched him for that game. So it was kind of funny because I know one guy, a friend of mine in another league, not the league that I'm in with you, Lachlan, he lost because you didn't start Myles Gaskin, and that kind of sucks. But
funny thing is, more people are going to start Myles Gaskin this week, and he's probably going to have a bust kind of game.
I know it's up and down, but Gaskin, coming into this year, did not look too bad. It's just the Finns offense has been something. I don't really like it at all. Another common name, Derrick Henry. Oh my gosh, he lit up the Jaguars. And if we look back, I think in his career, I believe that was his 11th career game against the Jaguars. He now has over 16, I think it was a range of 13 to 16 total touchdowns, over 1,100 rushing yards. And I mean, that's just crazy. Like he
Tough
lights
week.
up Jacksonville.
Tough week to be Urban Meyer. We'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, but he's laughing because Gruden lost his job and he got to keep his. So
Yeah.
you're seeing those memes rolling. Oh my gosh, you got like
poor John Gruden, man.
I know. You have NFL memes, you have Canadian Cutler, you have Ghetto Gronk. Everyone's just jumping on that and pushing those memes.
Trenches, man. It's the trenches.
Yeah, so it's weird because I mean Gruden's now removed from the Ring of Honor or something like that from the Buccaneers, and he was the coach that brought them their first Super Bowl. So there's a lot of just wacky stuff going around the league right now. So it's unfortunate. And then the last one of the RBs, Lachlan, is Alvin Kamara had 29 points. Looking more characteristic, certainly from probably your first round selection or keeper. So Kamara's looking all right. Now moving on to some tight ends, we'll quick fire these. Mark Andrews had 41. Oh my God. The 2-point conversions, the big plays,
have yourself an evening. Oh my God.
I mean, he and Lamar combined for over 80. So that's just nuts. That's nuts. 2 players. If you had both of them as a tandem, I mean, you were laughing last night.
Absurd.
You had Njoku on the Browns, who, I mean, Lachlan, that name was pulled out of God knows where, probably the depths of the earth, and brought us today on that episode because, oh my God, he had 27 points and like no one was thinking of him because obviously Austin Hooper, who you know quite well as a Falcons fan, should have been getting those targets.
Well, I mean, Austin Hooper hasn't really been getting those targets, to be honest with you, at all. Like, it's been pretty disappointing season. I don't know. I've never agreed with the Austin Hooper leaving Atlanta situation, but you know what? He got his money, and you know, he's not an all-pro tight end like he was in Atlanta. So, you know, you get what you pay for sometimes.
Yeah. And I mean, the Browns did not have a bad game by any means. I mean, their defense did, but the offense was incredible. So, I mean, all the power to him. Dawson Knox had 20, Hunter Henry had 19. And oh my gosh, fantasy managers have been waiting for this the entire year because Kyle Pitts had 26 points.
Woo!
I know you love that.
Go.
I know you love that as a
massive
fan.
Day.
I love that as a fantasy owner because, oh my God, it was just beautiful to watch. He's like, they have to use him like that every single freaking week.
Following the Falcons social media has been interesting because they're like Kyle Pitts' first career catch, and it's like a 1 yard, 4th and inches shovel play. Yeah. And like, you just look at the comments, it's like, please use him. It'd be nice if you used your first round pick a little bit, you know?
Yeah. And we were finally seeing, Lachlan, the nightmare matchup that people thought he was going to be, because linebackers can't cover that guy.
Well, and another thing to keep in mind is that the Falcons also have Hayden Hurst, who they traded for last season as well.
Yeah. Who's
in the 2020 offseason. He was a very solid tight end, had a pretty decent season last year with Matt Ryan. In his second year with that offense, you know, him and Matty Ice are only developing more chemistry. And, you know, obviously with the sad departure of Julio, you know, there's more opportunity that opens up for Pitts as well as Hurst. But, you know, Cordell Patterson is, you know, taken a lot of the spotlight. But, you know, I feel like Kyle Pitts is going to be utilized, and I think this is going to be a bit of a wake up call to the rest of the league too. That is saying like, look, like if you put a linebacker on Kyle Pitts, like you're going to pay for it.
For sure, he had a phenomenal game. I watched that entire game. That morning game, I mean, Corey Davis disappointed me, but every time the Falcons got the ball, I mean, they were certainly giving Pitts the targets that he deserves and that he got at Florida. And it was really nice. It was refreshing to see as a fantasy manager, but I'm sure as a fan too. So it was beautiful to watch.
Great. It's great.
So that's the end of our top performers. Moving on to this week, we only have 3 as the weeks get shorter and shorter. There's less options to pick for you. So we try to cherry pick the best ones that we think could have the biggest effect on your fantasy season. So waiver wires, number 1, Lachlan, we said we probably never heard of this name again, but here it is. Kadarius Toney, who had 13 points last week, 29 points this week. He didn't even have a touchdown. He had like 10, or I think it was about 13 targets for like 180 yards. And over the last 2 games, he's averaging about 10 targets, which is incredible for a wide receiver. I mean, Jamar Chase, who's an amazing player actually this year, who's very surprising. He gets about like 5-6 targets a game, but he makes like 100 yards out of it and a touchdown. So Kadarius Toney is starting to see that from Daniel Jones and that Giants offense. So that's certainly a bright spot. And after this week, it should be good.
another thing with the Giants offense too is they're running very thin. Because Galladay is doubtful for this week. And as of right now, Darius Slayton still has that fat red Q beside his name.
Yes.
Which is never good to see. He's probably on waivers in the majority of leagues.
Yeah.
But if he's on your team, I mean, obviously it sucks because you probably picked him up because Galladay's value's been, up and down.
Inconsistent.
Yeah. And another name on that Giants offense too, Devontae Booker. I feel like it's similar to the Mike Davis situation last year when McCaffrey went down. Because who knows how long Saquon will be out.
No, for sure. And people might question that and be like, but we don't know if the production's going to be there. I bet he literally put up 20 points last week in his first.
The volume will be there because what are they going to do? Not hand the ball off?
Yeah. So, I mean, it was kind of a similar situation. I mean, Wayne Gallman, even last year, that's a name that people remember. He wasn't bad. He was a lower end RB2, but he wasn't terrible. He could put up 20 points one week. So
Devonta Freeman as well with the Giants last year too.
For sure. So Devontae Booker looks even a little bit better than that right now. And he had 2 total touchdowns last game. So that's great for him. Oh, another thing I just want to quickly mention about Kadarius Toney. I mean, he's a very good wide receiver. I just don't think the Giants needed him, to be honest with you, because he could have gone to a team that maybe was in more need of a skill position other than the wide receiver loaded Giants. But Kadarius Toney, I mean, he burned Trayvon Diggs once or twice in that game, who's the hottest corner in the league in terms of interceptions.
Question. I mean, that guy's on. Trayvon Diggs coming into this week was on fire. That defense really was playing well as a unit as well. I'd say.
Yeah, for sure. But he was holding his own. He was more than holding his own. He had a fantastic week. And then the final waiver wire pickup might surprise some of you guys, but it's Carson Wentz actually. So Carson Wentz is someone who's kind of proven himself this year. I mean, that he's got out of that Philly slump. He has great weapons. He has, Trey Burton, he has Mo Alley Cox, he on offense, and then Michael Pittman Jr. He has Zach Pascal. He has Paris Hilton. Paris Campbell. That's Paris Hilton's an actress or something like that, isn't it? Paris Campbell, and then T.Y. Hilton. I mean, that's nothing. A poor T.Y. man. That guy just went right down the toilet. So
T.Y. Hilton. If you played fantasy football in 2011 to 2015, 16, Ty was your guy.
He was your guy, man. He was an X factor on Madden.
Not anymore.
Literally 2 years ago.
Unfortunately, those days are gone.
Yeah,
but I mean, it's amazing what'll happen to a player as promising as Carson Wentz when he goes and changes markets, and all of a sudden the spotlight is kind of off of him. And in Philly, it was just constant, just slander shoved down his throat week after week after week. And it's not like he was a bad quarterback. It's just when they won the Super Bowl in 2018, he wasn't the guy that did it.
No, for sure.
Philly fans kind of forever hold that grudge against them.
Yeah. And it's all in the market too. I mean, Indianapolis is smaller, it's more quiet, but he's still getting production. I mean, he had 402 yards, which isn't a small game by any means. He had 22 fantasy points. He's consistently putting up about 20, and he's on the waiver wires in a lot of leagues. So he's a consistent player. His division's pretty crappy. I mean, that's in terms of defenses, that's about as bad as it gets in football. So you want to definitely take Carson Wentz, pick him up if you're struggling at quarterback.
Yeah.
Right,
I mean, also down the stretch, I mean, the Colts need to kind of turn up a little bit more. They need to take it to the next level. Cause I think they have another gear as a team.
Yeah.
And I think once that gear gets shifted into, then Carson Wentz will be a very solid fantasy option. Because he's going to be their guy going forward now, who leads them into the playoffs and, can get them on a little bit of a run year after year, I think.
I completely agree. And they're not a 1-4 team by any means. It's a bit unlucky, but they have so much talent there, and his wide receivers and his weapons are well built. He's good friends with Frank Reich, the head coach. He played with him before, and he's back, and the offense is clicking. So that looks good. Now we're moving on to our starts and sits for the week, Lachlan, which, as we did this episode, we will revisit in the next episode to see how we did. Here's 5 options for you guys. So Carson Wentz versus Houston. You definitely, oh my God, are you starting him versus Houston? because they should light up that
Yep.
Davis Mills, man.
As well, you could even take a chance if you really needed it on the Colts defense there as well against Houston, because Houston is not the greatest football team out there.
No. Number 2, Myles Gaskin versus Jacksonville. I'm actually going to start Gaskin again this week just because, I mean, it's Jacksonville. What do you want? What more do you want me to say? And look how Derrick Henry lit them up last week. I feel like the Dolphins OC and Brian Flores are going to realize that, hey, I mean, Gaskin, this guy, don't forget him from last year. He's a baller. We're struggling right now. So why not take a chance, run the ball more? And certainly you can do that against Jacksonville. So Myles Gaskin is a great option out of the backfield and for handoffs. Then we got a big combination here. I like Indianapolis this week against Houston, as everyone should. I'm saying you should start Michael Pittman, Zach Pascal. Zach Pascal has had 2 weeks that haven't been the greatest, but I sincerely believe he's going to get a touchdown or 2 and about like 50 yards with 5-6 receptions. So I would say start Zach Pascal. Michael Pittman's always a beast, and Jonathan Taylor, obviously, because you can run the ball against Houston too. So those are 3 with us, 4 players actually from the Colts this week, Loch.
Yeah, I have one quick too as well. And it's the flip side. Gaskin's opponent, the Jacksonville Jaguars. I would start James Robinson going forward.
Oh, he's getting a lot better.
Because I'll tell you, 4 touchdowns in his last 3 games. And his lowest production over his last 3 games was 20.6 points against Cincinnati in week 4. So he's getting used more. And we saw last year what happened when James Robinson was a 3-down horse back. I mean, that guy went crazy last year. And sure. I feel like the Jaguars are slowly starting to let him kind of come into his own shell again and be himself and kind of run and attack defenses downhill like we saw last year. And I feel like the first 2 weeks, Urban Meyer kind of limited him because they wanted Trevor Lawrence to kind of work a little bit more magic, but then they realized that their O-line sucks. And that Lawrence had next to no time to find any open receivers downfield. So when they started utilizing Robinson, both pass catching on short options and running the ball, I feel like their offense found a little bit more success.
I completely agree. So that's also a very good option. And even for future weeks, you guys should be starting him because he is a special player. Darrell Henderson versus the Giants. You're going to want to start him. His last game against another weak run defense in Seattle, he had 89 rushing yards, but he also had 5 receptions for 27 yards because he sees that production out of the backfield as well. So Henderson, not someone I like every single week necessarily, but certainly I'd say if he's one of those players that you're like, should I start him? Should I not? Against the Giants, I definitely would. And the final 2 is you start Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt, either or both of them against Arizona. So Arizona, although they're not a terrible defense, I mean, these guys had 25 and 20 points against the Chargers, who I thought would stop them or at least limit them to a bit more. But they each get their fair share of touches, and they maximize their touches when they do get them. As you could see, I mean, Chubb had an incredible run the other game. Kareem Hunt gets the goal line touches. He gets touchdowns. So both very reliable options there. Moving on to the sit options, Loch. And we got some greasy ones here. Some greasy players in this upcoming week. We talked about Buffalo. I love Buffalo so much. I like their defense, and that's why I'm not starting Ryan Tannehill this week, who had only 13 points last week against Jacksonville, even though they did hand the ball off given. But, I mean, he's going downhill a little bit, and certainly against the hot Buffalo team, maybe which you can talk a bit about.
Buffalo, I mean, they game plan Mahomes pretty well, I'd say. On Sunday Night Football, Buffalo was on fire. They had something to prove, going back into Kansas City, the place where their season ended last winter.
Yep. Grudge, man.
And how many of those guys that were on the field Sunday night played in that AFC Championship game? Quite a few.
Yeah, the majority of the team.
Quite a few. So they were out for blood. They had something to prove, and that defense showed off against Mahomes and the Chiefs. The Chiefs broke through at times, but not near the big plays that Josh Allen was making. on the offensive side of the ball for the Bills.
Yeah, Buffalo's a bend don't break team. I mean, they like you said, they played Mahomes brilliantly, and
their defense hung in there all game long, didn't give up. You know, if a couple drives they got worked pretty bad down to the goal line and stuff.
But that's given.
But that's a given when you're playing the Chiefs, right? But I think this week they're gonna feed off that momentum, and you know, I think it's gonna be a good week for the Bills playing a not very strong Tennessee defense.
No, my God.
So yeah,
I only started them last week in fantasy because they were playing Jacksonville and they had that like scoop and score for 6 early in the game, so that was nice. But one player in Buffalo that actually would sit this week, unfortunately, and it pains me to say this, is Cole Beasley versus Tennessee. He's only had 4 targets in the last 2 weeks, which is very concerning as a fantasy manager. So it's just he's not reliable right now. So I definitely would not start him at flex at any position. So it's too bad because he's a talented player if he gets those targets, but he's not getting them. And Emmanuel Sanders is getting them. So what can you do there? We got Henry Ruggs versus Denver. We're sitting Henry Ruggs because Denver's lost their last 2. I mean, so has Las Vegas, but Denver really needs this if they want to show that they're not fakers, which I do think they are to some extent. But the defense on their team is certainly a stronger point. So they have good corners, good DBs, and Henry Ruggs again is going to be easier to game plan against than like a Darren Waller, who's a mismatch nightmare rather. And of course you have that whole Gruden debacle. So I believe that offense has taken, that whole team's taken a bit of a hit this week, which is unfortunate.
I'd say an interesting situation to monitor is Hunter Renfrow, because, you know, he's been kind of the odd man that gets that volume in times. But I think, you know, like Patrick Surtain and Justin Simmons will kind of be floating around on Henry Ruggs, and, you know, 2 very, very talented players in that secondary in Denver. So don't look for anything massive out of Ruggs this week.
Exactly. That's why I would set him. I just don't think the point of this is you want it to be a reliable option. I don't think that Ruggs is reliable by any means. He's had 8 points and 9 points in the last 2 weeks. Last 2, we have OBJ versus Arizona. Once again, I think they're gonna lock him down. OBJ's had like about 10 targets over the last 2 weeks combined, 5 and 4 fantasy points, around 5 fantasy points the last 2 weeks, which is, I mean, that's not good at all. Once again, not reliable. And final, Miles Sanders versus Tampa Bay. Miles Sanders has had like 6, 8, 7, and 10 in those last 4 weeks. So, I mean, this isn't just for Miles Sanders only. Literally any running back against Tampa's defense, you're not going to want to start. I mean, so Kenneth Gainwell, I mean, you're going to want to sit too. And I was thinking of saying sit Hurts, but honestly, Hurts, although he doesn't have a great game, he doesn't have a bad fantasy game. Like he did not play that well against Carolina whatsoever, but I mean, he did score on the ground. He still had about 18, 20 fantasy points, which isn't terrible.
And that's the upside to him, is if he's capable enough with his feet that if it's not there in the air, then he's going to take off. And it's kind of hard for defenses to kind of plan against that, because if they drop back, they're giving him a first down if he runs.
No, absolutely.
But then if you kind of stack the linebackers, you know, about 5 yards, 6 yards out, and kind of hover them to take away any short plays, then he's one-on-one downfield with a receiver, and that could work out as well. So it's kind of tough sometimes to navigate those running backs like Hurts who love going to the ground.
Absolutely. So that brings us to the end of our starts and sits. We're going to check in on that next week to see how we did and see if we're liars and just talking out of our rear ends, or we kind of have an idea of what we're talking about.
It's most likely going to be a bit of both.
Yeah. I mean, it's give and take, you know, so only hope for the best. And that pretty much brings us to the end of our episode, but we do have 2 annual traditions, and we're going to
there's more.
There's more. There's always more. Fantasy player of the week. Oh my good Lord. Am I so happy to announce this right now?
Yeah. I'm not even who it is. I'm not even going to take the spotlight for you, man. Like that. This is all you. All you.
Oh, thank you so much. So we're looking at the 2020 Offensive Rookie of the Year in Justin Herbert, who put up 42 0.82 fantasy points, which was the most around the league. He had 398 passing yards, 4 touchdowns, 29 rushing yards and touchdown, which is a total of, drum roll please, 427 total yards and 5 total touchdowns. Are you kidding me right now? And this was again,
wild.
This is against the best defense in the NFL up until this week.
Yeah.
And I don't care what anyone else says. I mean, that is my pick. That's from an unbiased. I mean, you could say it's a little biased, but the Browns are good. I mean, they have a good team.
Honorable mention goes out to Mark Andrews and Tom Brady.
And
Tom
Lamar.
Brady. Yeah. Sure.
I mean, all those guys had 42, pretty like essentially.
Yeah.
But I'm going to give it a little bit to Herbert just because he did technically get the most points. And oh my gosh.
Which, you know what, if people want to say that our fantasy player of the week is just the player that puts up the most points, it won't always be like that. Justin Herbert legitimately was the best player you could have in fantasy football. And was also probably one of the more entertaining players you could watch in the NFL last week, I'd say.
For sure. If you watch that game, that was
was crazy.
It was already in contention for game of the year because oh my God, there were so many damn points scored, almost 100 points scored in that game, which is nuts.
Shall we move on to the question?
For sure.
Before you get full of yourself and talking about the Chargers team.
Before I go on for the next 25 minutes about why Justin Herbert is the next coming of Jesus. Going on to the fantasy question of the week and the end of our episode. What the hell should I do with Sam Darnold? That's a great question. Asked me by a close friend of mine. What should I do with Sam Darnold? Now, Sam Darnold had one bad week, and which was last week. But if you look at every other single week, the fact that he leads the NFL in rushing touchdowns, I don't know how. Don't ask me, but I mean, that's still a thing. And you look at his upcoming schedule. I mean, he had one off week, and I sincerely think he's going to get back to business because he's facing Minnesota's defense, the Giants' defense, and Atlanta's defense. No offense, Lachlan. Upcoming in the next 3 weeks.
Dude, I've already said it on this podcast that they're suspect at best. Honestly, yeah. So
it is the secondary suspect.
Yeah, the secondary is suspect. Their D line is okay.
Great, Jared.
But
Jared's a great player.
But yeah, I'd say, one of the first rules in fantasy football is always overreact, right? Mm-hmm. So this is just a situation where you just got to keep your composure a little bit. You got to play the long game. Just get to the playoffs and anything can happen. Where you need to be a little desperate is if you're winless at this point. If you're a manager and you don't have a win, maybe you need to take a shot.
For sure.
And try and turn the season around.
I completely agree. But the fantasy question week at the end of the day is, yes, you want to keep and start Sam Darnold week after week. And because his his value is dropped a little bit, this is a great time to go and trade for him. Definitely a great time to go and trade for him. Someone who you want because he looks like he's going to be a solid quarterback for the rest of the year. And in terms of fantasy production, averaging between that like 22 to 30 point range each week, that's all you could ask for. So that's our fantasy question of the week. And that concludes episode number 6 on Fantasy Cast.
Thanks again to everyone who watches and listens. And again, we are now on Spotify. I know it took us long enough, but every episode of the Fantasy Cast is now available for your listening pleasure on Spotify as well as YouTube. And you can find both of those in the link in our Instagram bio at the Fantasy Cast on Instagram. Click the link tree. It takes you both to our YouTube channel and our Spotify page. So yeah, keep listening, keep running it up, and we'll keep making more great episodes for you guys.
Absolutely.
So that concludes episode number 6 for everyone here at Shot for Sports. As always, he is Ty White. I'm Lachlan McTagg. We'll see you guys next week. Have a great week, everyone.
Have a great week. Thursday Night Football, Bucks, Eagles.